If we're going to go back, I wanted to be a singer. I actually wanted to be an opera singer as well.
Wow.
One of the hardest industries to get into, it turns out. It was this entrepreneur spirit. I was like, I really want to work for a young company.
And then you went, okay, I'm now going to start my own organisation. How did that come about? Admin and assistant roles are always so undervalued.
They think, I just want someone I'm just going to throw admin at. It's not fit for purpose just throwing admin at someone, because it's rarely that's not your issue normally in the business.
Thought process is always like, oh, okay, this woman owns a business. There's no like, how does this woman own a business? It's just, it is what it is. And it's always just a bit strange because you've got the traditional working models of 9 to 5 and shift work. Neither of them work for kids. Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Caroline with us. Caroline, do you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Well, thank you so much, Charlie, for having me. I'm Caroline. I am the founder of a business called Upsource. We're a virtual assistant agency that provides a whole host of executive assistants, personal assistants, business support, operational support to other entrepreneurs, founders, startups, scale-ups and SMEs. I am also a mother. I have 2 young boys who are 6 and 3 and keep me very busy, and I started my business during a pandemic, so this is why I also do a bit of podcasting here and there, because I've got my own podcast called Bump to Business Owner, because I felt it was a real good conversation that we needed to have around founders who are mothers.
I love this. As I say, I'm very excited to get into the conversation of your pod, but I do want to start with how you came about becoming self-employed and starting Upsource, and sort of how that journey came about and the challenges that came with that. So first of all, could you just explain sort of where the idea came from?
Well, yeah, I think I've always had it in me to be self-employed and be an entrepreneur. We were chatting before this, but my dad and my maternal granddad, actually both my granddads, had all had their self-employed journey. So I think when you see it in your family, it's kind of, and I'm one of 3 children, so I think there was always going to be one of us, and it was the middle child that did it. But my background, I fell into, once upon a time, if we're going to go back, I wanted to be a singer. I actually wanted to be an opera singer as well.
Wow.
One of the hardest industries to get into, it turns out. And I was, so when I left uni, I kind of dabbled with that, and then obviously I needed to earn money. And when you're a woman straight out of uni, a great place I found out was to work as an office temp, which slowly turned into PAing. Turned out my organisational skills, I was an excellent PA, and it was really good. Really well paid when you're starting out as well. Like, it stagnates. That whole industry needs an overhaul, but when you first get into it, I was like, wow, it's great pay, and I didn't have to train in this. I was just like a singer. So so I went down that route, and I ended up just deciding singing wasn't for me. I ended up further down the road really falling out of love with it, and just actually calling an end on that journey. And I'm really glad I did that, and now I get a lot more joy out of musical theatre and things doing that. But so I was a career EA PA, but I worked in the NHS for a great hospital called Chelsea and Westminster. But I actually am in London, but I always thought I never know if I'm staying in London. And government organisations, there's always a cap on where you can go. There's a big cap. There's a cap in general with EAs and PAs of career progression, which is a wider industry issue, but that shows up big time within the NHS. And so I was like, I really want to, it was this entrepreneur spirit. I was like, I really want to work for a young company, like one that I can just get involved and grow with it. Eventually found a virtual assistant agency, and I really helped them build and grow, and worked really hard there, put more into that than I ever had done with my career. And but I had my first child a little bit by time, not completely timed, and I couldn't work in the same way, and eventually that did end in redundancy, and I went to go work for another friend's business, and then COVID happened, and that was an in-person business, and it wasn't the right fit anyway. I think it's really hard actually, which maybe we'll talk about later on. I think going from redundancy to finding your next role, like, it's like breaking a up a large relationship, I think it's a really tough time to then, you have to earn money, but jumping into your next role is a hard move. And when COVID happened, I found out I was pregnant again, and I was like, who's going to hire a pregnant woman running around after a toddler in a pandemic, especially a PA? That was really like, a lot of PAs were, a lot of people were job hunting at that point, weren't they? And so I thought, well, I was an excellent VA, I will go do that again, and use this as an opportunity to just start my own business, and it worked out.
I mean, as I say, I always think we've got you would have dealt with China, our VA. I love them. Like, I love having China. It's just nice.
She's great as well. Shout out to China.
She is very good, and it's also just really nice to be able to give someone that responsibility that you can't necessarily divide your attention to, and it's been a massive help. So I think I've always said, in any organisation I've worked in, admin and assistant roles are always so undervalued, because half the time without them a company or an organisation would fold, but no one knows it. Everyone goes, they're just a VA or they're just an admin, and it's like, no, they're a lot more than that. They're a lot more clued up than you think.
It's so much history tied up to it, because I think there's a wider, when you're support services in an organisation, so not revenue generating, there's always an issue with that, and support services, whether it's HR, comms, all of that, surprisingly not legal, but there's always an issue with that showing your value. But I think there is still this, because it was a female role and women went to do it, and you go watch Mad Men, things like that, you can see how the role was treated, and the legacy is still there. So I'm excited, because there's loads of us still trying to showcase what we are as strategic partners when you get to that level as well. I think that's the other issue, is the career paths for us, still utilising our skills and making sure there's a career path within that industry.
100%. And I also want to dive into so obviously you had all that journey going through your career, and then you went, okay, I'm now going to start my own organisation. How did that come about? Obviously, you just did you start working in the world of VA, and then you went, actually, there's loads of support I could provide to other VAs, and that was where the idea came from?
Yeah, so basically it came about because I did really well in the virtual assistant agency I worked for, and I really liked it. I worked for some really exciting founders who are doing great things in London. Their businesses are still going. Some of them are quite well known now, and I just found that really exciting. But also knowing I was really good at building the business, I ended up focusing on client onboarding and client retention, and it just really built my confidence as well of working with clients, and finding that was where I was really good at. Literally, when I got made redundant, my dad said to me, obviously the guy had run his own business most of his life, was his own accountancy firm, was like, go and start your own. And I was like, no way. I'd been so put off with how things were done and how toxic the business had come at that point. I was the first, but after that, basically the whole company had gone by, anyone I knew who worked there had gone by COVID. Yeah, it becomes so toxic. I was like, no, I can't go in that world again. I don't like it. Yeah. But then I clearly had this calling to me, because when I was still kind of exploring what to do and working again, I did find myself in Facebook groups, and I was like, this is a really nice industry. The VAs are really supportive of each other. How nice. I was like, and then someone reached out to me from Chelsea and Westminster who had a friend who needed a VA just for 10 hours a month. I said to her, look, I'm working, but I can fit your work in the evenings or on a Friday, because I decided to work 4 days a week with my kids. And so I ended up taking on, before COVID happened, just one client, and it kind of planted the seed there that I could do this. And I, like any good accountant's granddaughter as well, I started with the financial plan when I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, what do I need? Because I, at the time, didn't know if I was going to be furloughed or if I was just at home looking after my kid pregnant with no money coming in, which terrifies me. I've got divorced parents, like, complete thing. I really believe in women having their financial independence. I'm as passionate about that as I am the VA industry and as mothers in business. And so for me, I'm like, I need this money, so what am I going to do? And so I did the financial plan, showed it to my dad, obviously the accountant, and he was like, yeah, this is doable. I was like, I'm pregnant as well, by the way.
Just throw that in. I suppose if you're gonna do it, there's never a great time to just go ahead.
I think that was it. I mean, there's never a great time. I managed to go through this crazy startup, burnout with my first child, planning a wedding. We got married 4 months after my first baby was born. I think I'd gone through all of that, and being a bridesmaid for some of my other friends, I was like, what's starting a business? At least I'm in control of this. So,
yeah, exactly. Yep.
And I decided to go down the agency route. At first, I was fully booked with clients by the summer. And then any more clients I took on, I was fully booked for what I wanted, which was, if anyone here is listening in the virtual assistant world, that's 120 hours per month. If you think about it, 160 hours per month is working a full-time role. And I just thought, well, I'll bring on a team, and I want to take maternity leave this time because I really sacrificed it for this startup I was working for the first time. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take maternity leave. I'm going to hand them over to a team. So I had a team of 5. And then I just decided to grow that model as we went on. I learned a lot, as while I didn't have a great experience the first time in the VA world, I learned so much on how to do it and how not to do it. So I could take those learnings into my own business.
I completely hear you. And one of the things that came through from that is it's so important the team you've got around you in terms of just the relationships. I think I always say on this podcast, it's something I've realised quite recently, is every problem, if you go all the way back, it always starts with communication.
Yeah.
Every
absolutely. Trust and communication. And I think that's what we always say to clients is like, and what we push with the team when they come on is like the communication, and we over communicate with everyone, team and clients at the start. And then, it comes back to communication. And then if something's gone wrong, then that breaks the trust. And that's the hard part. In early days, it's different when you've known people a long time and you can
know
get
how they work. And I think that's also probably, that was something I wanted to speak to you about as well, is obviously being a VA, it's very much, oftentimes you're working with 1 or 2 individuals quite closely. How much of that impacts the working life and the working relationships of the VAs with the people they're working for? Because I think so much of it's down to how, for want of a better word, how good of a relationship you have with your boss, because then you build a much stronger working relationship, because as you say, it's that whole thing of you develop an understanding of how they work, how their brain works, so you can almost catch them before they've even fell.
I love that. That is a fantastic question, and thank you for asking that, because I think that's a real someone who really understands it is about relationship building. Because I think sometimes when people start on their journey of getting a VA, they think, I just want someone I'm just going to throw admin at, and it's like, okay, firstly, those sorts of people, they then struggle with the prices of UK-based VAs in our agencies, or EU-based VAs, shall I say, and they want cheap outsourcing abroad, and then they realise that it's not fit for purpose just throwing admin at someone, because it's rarely that's not your issue normally in the business. It's a bigger issue, and it's about processes, it's about task management, it's about delegating, and like I said, you need to build that relationship. It's so key. And having been a VA, working with a client who it's not been a good relationship, because that can happen, it happens to everyone. I really believe in relationship fit. So when I clients and VAs on it's not the same for everyone's business, but for our business, they meet each other before they start with each other, because it sometimes I think, on paper they sound great, and then you get them together and you're like, no, that wasn't a good fit. And that is just something you can't tell unless you've spoken with each other, and it can really, as a VA, PA, EA, be quite damaging if you've not got that right fit, because it feels really hard, and it should feel like a great relationship where you can come to each other and say, Charlie, like, this isn't working, we need to fix this, let's talk about it. And that should work both ways if I was your VA and you were my client.
Completely agree. I think it's, as I say, I never understand when almost the person that is getting the support feels like they don't need to be a good communicator, because you'll get the best results if you communicate what you actually want. If you just go, oh, just something like this, and then they're like, that's quite vague, and not building the process. But then, as I say, you touched on something there perfectly. Of as soon as you bring someone on, like someone like myself, that's only I've only got 1 or 2 people that I've brought on to support me. It brings a whole different kettle of fish, because you go, I was so used to working with myself and my partner, who just automatically knows the ins and outs of what we do, and then we brought on a couple of members and we were like, oh, we've actually got to think about how we explain this.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, you can be vague, that's absolutely fine, but then you've got to know that they've just got to get to know your business, and then can be like, okay, I've spent some time reviewing this, and this is what will help you.
What was your biggest challenge with the company? What was the biggest, oh my God, what am I doing moment?
All the time. No, I mean, it's always got to be the motherhood fact. I was pregnant and had to, I think I did really well. I got on clients, including people I'd worked with before and friends of theirs, because that's always the best way to get clients, is through referrals and people who know each other. I think really second trimester, when I was overworking myself trying to just build a business that was handoverable to people, and build these client documents that were handoverable to people, because they needed to do a great job in order for this to work, because they were going to compare them to me. And you know, that's really tough when you're the lead VA first doing that. All the time I get lead VAs coming going, I want to hand over this client, how can I do that? And we talk about it, but it's really tough when they've chosen you, because people buy from people, and it's a bit different now because they know from the get-go they're not getting me, and there's like, I've got the track record of getting the right people for them, so it's different now. But that was a really tough point. And in general, it's just been, how can I do this, grow a successful business, but still make sure I'm there in the early years for my kids? Because we almost lost my first child when he was born, a few hours after he was born, and had a bit of a neonatal intensive care journey with him. And, you know, that's been a whole journey itself, had PTSD from it. So just having to grow a huge amount, more than I ever have done, at the same time of trying to be like a really nice person, growing a team and being a nice person for them, and having time for them and having time for the clients, as well as feeling like making sure the kids weren't sacrificed in the meantime.
I can imagine as well, it ends up feeling like you're just constantly spinning plates and you just haven't got enough hands.
No, and you just have to drop stuff. I think that's it. I think I might have got slightly judged that I didn't read my kids' report until like 3 weeks after they'd been released earlier this year. But I'd had a meeting with the teacher before, but it was just like, sometimes it was just like at that period, I was like, the admin was just insane. I kind of had a gist of how my son was doing.
You said, obviously, talking about your pregnancy and that journey, did you face any, obviously where you were starting the business, did you face any discrimination in terms of when you were going to possible clients, they were automatically like, oh, God no, you're just about to have a baby?
Oh, thank you. That is a great question to ask, and I really appreciate the question. And I have to say, in that particular period, at least to my face, no. And, you know, they say things like one client said, you know, I obviously want to work with you, but that's okay. I'll go with someone else. Yeah. And that's fine. You know, that's also rubbing my ego a little bit. And I'm like, okay, you know, like, we've got this. But being in the VA community really helped me, because I had a mentor at the time, Mans Johnson, who was like, you just need to like go in and say, I'm pregnant, you won't be working with me, but you'll be working on my small team, and just have the courage to do it. Because at the end of the day, if a guy was taking maternity leave, that's how he would do it, and that's why they would buy from him. So in that moment, no. I think at times there have been a bit of, I think my whole thing from the start has been like, if 2 young guys are starting the same business, it's really cool. But if Jenny down the road with her 2 kids is doing it from her lounge, it's like, oh, that's cute. Which actually one of my podcasts has said about her flower business, which is hugely successful in a luxury $1 billion industry. But it's like, that's cute. And it is a bit like that. So I have to work extra hard to be like, give me the feedback. This is a business. I'm going to grow it. And my priority is that the team have an excellent experience and the clients have an excellent experience. And that's it's a business at the end of the day, no matter, even if I've got to go pick up my kid at 2:30 every day.
I mean, it's mad that we're still in that like Wolf of Wall Street mindset of like, oh no, to be a business person, you've got to be a man. It's like, really? I suppose it's, as we were speaking about before, I come from a family where both parents are self-employed. My mum's more of the traditional business brain, whereas my dad's more the hands-on business person. And I find it really strange because I've never had that thought process. It's always like, oh, okay, this woman owns a business. There's no like, how does this woman own a business? It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I don't think, and if I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I did till I had kids, because I've also had, like, my husband's mum was a leading radiologist and medical director of a large hospital. My stepmom was like financial director, CEO of several companies, and so I always I just didn't believe in it, kind of thing. And then I had kids and it was like, oh, it is different. And it is different. Like, I don't know if you've been following, but something's been happening with Innovate UK grants for women, and they just suddenly didn't give out all the money when they had plenty of applicants who had amazing feedback on their applications. And it's like things like that. It's just internalized misogyny, and it's everyone knows we need to do better, but it's just it's very uncomfortable to talk about. So like I said to you just before we came on the podcast, I just realized this is the first time I've been invited on a man's podcast.
I mean, it's nice to know.
I'm so excited to be here.
It's nice to know as well. I think obviously coming from the disability space as well, I'm just always there's that almost wanting to get rid of any kind of uninclusiveness. So I always just think, the thing I find the funniest about the men-women debate is I'm a firm believer of you realise none of us would be here, right? You know, that's how biology works.
Yeah,
and no one seems
if we complain about it, we chose to have the future taxpayers kind of thing.
It's so weird.
Yeah,
I mean, you'll probably have more passionate views on this, but one thing even myself, I'm not at the stage of having children. Me and my partner have talked about it, and it's always just a bit strange because you've got the traditional working models of 9 to 5 and shift work. Neither of them work for kids. And I find it's particularly if you look at the 9 to 5 world, I am it'd be so easy to adjust that so that the working day would be the same or slightly shorter than the school day. Just so then no one's got to worry about who's going to pick the kids up, because hopefully you'd be finished with work anyway. I still can't wrap my head around it. I'm like, why does this... it's hard because then there's the debate of but it generates other people's income because you have nannies and things like that, and play groups and all sorts.
I'm sure the nannies would still be there if we worked. I get, we'd all still want help in other ways, kind of thing. It's like when people think AI is taking over our jobs, it's like, no, we're all using it and we're all still going to be busy because that's just what we do. And we'll still need those roles, but it's just an infrastructure change, and it isn't. I had Rachel from Coro Kids, who, if anyone doesn't know Coro Kids, she's an amazing businesswoman running a fantastic nanny business, but also part of that is she's clearly trying to push the narrative and the change of the infrastructure and childcare being an infrastructure, because at the end of the day, the statistics coming out, whether it's America or here, about how stressed parents are, and it is, we're all living in an uncertain world, there's no doubt about that. We're all living in an economy right now where we're like, oh, what's going to happen? And as a self-employed person, you always get the rumours first of oh, people are dropping out of things, it's not going to be great. I'm like, oh god. And then you add then parenting on it, trying to pretend mine are little at the minute, so it's just trying to make them just think that they live in this lovely safe world, because that will make them feel safer as they get older.
It's mad as well, because I think as well with conversations I have with my partner, there's a lot of debate at the moment of people choosing not to have children, not because they don't necessarily want them, but because of the situation the world's in and the pressures that come with it, with the financial pressures, the time pressures and everything else. I think a lot of the coming through generation are going, I don't know how I'm going to pull it off. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
And I think from a female perspective, because this is what I've seen, I had kids before my friendship group did, and then I have like younger networks in it. There's still this whole thing, oh, I'm going to be one of those mums when I become it. And so there really isn't, from the female perspective, I don't know from the men kind of thing, I can't give that narrative, but from it's like we all change and we all become boring. All we talk about is kids. All we complain about is that we can't work a full day or just drop things and go to the pub, or have time for ourselves, or we're tired. And it's just like, and it's like, oh, I'm going to become one of them kind of thing. And it's like, and I think that's a huge narrative issue that we can't fix one-on-one. And I think women previous to us and women now are still trying to be like, so when a pregnant lady comes along, like, you'll wait and see, and they try and do that sort of thing, and it's not a helpful narrative to do. And I think but we're also, I get why they're doing it, we're all knackered and we're all like, why didn't someone tell me how like really hard this is? And I'm just going to be honest, it's the best thing in the world. You know, I almost lost one of my children and it like broke my world, just almost losing him, let alone like, and I didn't. So you know, I don't think I need to clarify, and that's another thing mothers have to do, I don't think I need to clarify how much I love my children, because I've built a business to work around them. So.
I mean, to be fair, like, as I say, I grew up in a very unique scenario where both parents were self-employed. My mum's work meant that she was around home a lot, whereas my dad's a builder by trade, so he was out about doing stuff most days. But then for me, it was weird because where I had mum as the constant, because she'd be working from home, and also we had a good family unit in terms of, I always joke and say, when I was growing up, it was like being a hot potato. I was at a different aunts, uncles, so-and-so's every day, but it wasn't this, like, everyone's like, oh, that sounds really, like, neglectful, and I'm like, no, I had a great time.
Lovely.
Yeah. I was so used to, oh, you're going around this person's house this weekend because mum and dad are doing this, and I'm like, oh, okay, and I'd just be... I mean, my nan and granddad were crazy.
No, I had a lot of that so my parents were divorced. My mum was a nurse, so out the house a lot, and so it was great when we were little and had a lot of grandparent help. So I was a really close relationship with them. But then as we got older and we kind of left to our own devices, I think it's taught me a lot about just because your kids are older doesn't mean they don't need to be around people. And I've started listening, something I've learned, because pre-motherhood I didn't listen enough to mothers, so I listened to mothers who are further on in their journey of teenagers and what's that like, and they say the same. It's like, you think they don't need you, and they need you just as much, just in a different way, like, and that's what's interesting what you brought up. But I think that sounds delightful, your upbringing. I mean, off to lots of people. I'd say
I was just it was the way it worked, and it's like people find it really weird because I had a very full relationship with my grandparents, so they'd have us, or all 4 grandkids with my 2 cousins, they'd have us every 2 weeks for the weekend. So it was chaos. It was chaos.
Absolute chaos. Oh my goodness. Yeah, right. I'm going to note that down and tell my parents.
I mean, it's mad. But then, as I say, what's interesting is I remember not that long ago, me and my sister had a chat. So my sister's 6 years older than me. But she grew up when mum and dad were building their businesses, and her initial years were a lot different to what mine were, because when I came along, mum and dad were quite established, I suppose is the word. So it's interesting because it's at different stages of self-employment, depends on parenthood and everything else. It's such a moving vehicle of like one piece of the puzzle could change a lot of things.
Oh, it really, really does. I hard agree on that. And I think with your first, from a female perspective, the traditional mother perspective, you're trying to keep everything normal and as is, and you're like, right, I'm going to take this amount off, I'm going to go back to work 5 days a week, and then the baby fits around you and you're not going to change. And then you start to adapt to that, and then a second comes along and you're already used to like not having any money. You're probably not going to go back to work, or you're going back to work in a different way, and then normally you see your partner's salary go like this.
Yeah.
And it's interesting interesting. And then this is where the gender pay gap comes in, and this is what they're saying, it's a maternity pay gap. And you know, I used to work for people, and I'd see the emails come in for pay rises, and I'm like, they've just become a dad, and you know, I knew it. And it's like, like, it's fine for them to ask for pay rises, go for it, but so you just don't see a woman coming up from maternity leave going, right, pay rise please.
It's almost like there's like a responsibility, almost with a traditional family setup, there's almost like a responsibility shift of the mum's taking the hit financially because she's now looking after the baby. So in that case, we've got to bump up dad's wages to kind of counterbalance it, which in some senses makes sense. But then also it's like, why can't we just build the system so it better accommodates both parties?
Yeah, it makes sense, but the fundamental issues of it are, number one, obviously that makes sense if you are going to live together, die together, at the right time as well. So then the woman, because women tend to live longer than men, so they end up with less of a pension, so they die, so they get their man's pension and things. So it works in those particular scenarios. We all know that life, it doesn't work like that, and death, sickness, divorces all happen. And then it also doesn't work in the fact we're living in an uncertain world. And so my granddad had the same job for his whole life, and that's what you did. Well, he was actually a business owner, but his mates, if they were employed, would have had the same job, maybe gone up certain management levels their whole life. They wouldn't have been made redundant. Me and my husband have had 3 redundancies in this household the past 5 years. And don't get me wrong, they've all worked out well, we thrived. But that just, and one of them, pressure. He accepted a job from a bank, and then he was meant to start, and then they cut all the recruitment because they were like, oh, we're probably getting acquired, and this was like a well-known safe bank. And I was like, careers aren't certain like that anymore. So you can't, I just feel when we're all being encouraged to get a mortgage together before we say have families, things like that, most people do get mortgages with another person. That's how they get on the housing ladder. And then suddenly one of them, the finances don't work out anymore, and then the other one, it's all on them, and that's hard for them as well. I know my husband had definitely felt the pressure at times.
I mean, the reason why I'm smiling like a Cheshire cat is because we're apparently going through my mum and dad's careers here, but my mum's a mortgage and financial advisor, so I get a lot of that world coming in of, like, as I say, me and my partner are considering moving out, and it always comes back to the argument at the moment, you can't really move out on your own, and that's a crazy place to be, because it's kind of like you either move out with a friend and you move in together, or you're in a situation where you got a partner, but then the debate comes in of, oh, you got to get a deposit together, then how are you going to get that together? How's that discussion going to work? If you don't put in equal amounts, then there's the whole drawing up a contract to make sure both parties are protected.
That's what we had, that's me and my husband's world. And then I'm like, what happens to that contract? Does that still count when we have kids? Because I put in the work.
Your husband's like, if you can't find it, it don't count. But it's interesting. I say it's like you say, it's the whole thing of the working world has changed, and I think as well we're seeing a bit of a tug of war happening with the whole hustle culture, entrepreneurship, and work-life balance, because it's that whole thing of everyone's going on about work-life balance, but then 95% of us have all got, if we're working standard jobs, have all got side gigs because we're like, oh, we need extra money, or we don't enjoy the job we're in, so we want to try and find a way out. And it's crazy when you sit there and think about it. You're like, it's like I say, it's a big game of tug of war.
Yeah, and you can get so burnt out just doing that. I mean, even me, like with Bump to Business Owner, you know, I'm not afraid of saying the goal is to monetize it, things like that. So I've got a business and I've got a side gig as well. And then it's still like, I still don't feel like I'm done with 2. And I think that's the entrepreneurship way. You're constantly like, can I make money out of this kind of thing? But also still focus on the main money earner and the potential of your main business. But I mean, it goes without saying, I'm anti-hustle culture from someone who's had a whole experience of mental health the past few years. I'm glad, is starting to be seen, it doesn't work. I especially don't think it works for women's bodies and our cycles, which is a lot I've been reading about. Yeah. There's a lot to be said about not beating myself up if I'm going to be like due my periods and I can't work as hard as I used to, as I can at the beginning of the month. Whereas at the beginning of the month, I might be like, right, I can work till midnight and I'm fine, kind of thing. Yeah. That doesn't happen. I'm not really a night person. But you get my meaning, is that I think there's a lot to be said about working with when you work best and working smartly.
100%.
But you've got to learn that about yourself.
I think it's really, because it's one of the things I actually brought up on a previous podcast. When it comes to optimal time for me to work, I'm a very strange individual, because I jokingly say it all the time, I'm a perpetually tired pigeon, because I'm...
Oh, I say that too! That's my thing. That's all I am, because I don't do, when is my best time to work?
No, I don't have one, because the morning don't talk to me until I've had my first coffee, and in the evening I'm like, no, my brain's fried, I can't.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I have to, it's like, and that's a journey I've been going on recently, because I just was leaving loads of projects and detailed work to the evening, and I was just like, I can't, and because obviously I mainly work school hours, and finish at 2:30, which is in the middle of the day, and I'm like, oh, when am I going to get, I was beating myself up about it, and I'm like, why are you doing this work in the evening? What you should be doing, if you are working in the evening and you need to address how many evenings a week you're doing that, is just getting on top of your Slack and your inbox and just like your to-do list and just housekeeping and family admin, and then the rest I should be doing, like the project work. I have to be strict about not being on Slack or being answerable to everyone, because like I said, if I was doing this podcast in the middle of the day, I wouldn't be answerable to anyone. So I need to treat my work like that, and that's my job as the business owner to be doing that work, kind of thing. So
100%.
So I tell you what, 9 till 10 is the sweet spot, Charlie, for us tired pigeons.
I always sit there thinking, do you know what I always say my ideal day would be like 10 till 4. If I could get 10 till 4, then I could get up at a time where I could...
You're meant to be a working parent, Charlie.
It's I say, I just find it really interesting, because everyone goes, oh, I'm a night owl, I'm a morning person, and I'm like,
neither.
I'm neither. I just... Yeah. I mean, I always say to...
so grumpy in the mornings. Like, so one of my children has taken after me, and I'm like, Greg, like, me and him are just not made for the mornings.
Weirdly, so the thing in my household is my dad's a morning person and gets up early because of work. And then he feels the need to ask you a million questions, and you've only just woke up.
That's my dad too.
And you're like, leave me alone.
No, that's definitely my dad, and I'd be like, and they were divorced, so he'd often call me to ask me these questions when I was like living at home. I'd be like, one time I remember I was like 15, I had to address like, just don't call me in the morning.
It's just funny, because every morning there's like, we all go out to, I don't know why, we all go out to the kitchen, and it's like my other half's just there translating my grunts, because she knows that before I finish my first coffee, it's yes or no questions, otherwise don't talk to him. But it's interesting when you say about like the whole contacting people outside of work hours, because there's been a big push to try and get through the bill of like not allowing work to contact you outside of work hours, and I've always advocated for it, because I sit there and go, I always think people have lives. It's like, even with we've spoke quite a lot about poor China's probably thinking, why did this turn into the China show? But like, if I ever have to message China like out of hours, I'm so sorry, but it's only while it's in my head. Don't answer this now.
Honestly, Charlie, delay send is your best friend. And I'm saying this after I messaged someone on Sunday on my team who I've apologised profusely for doing it for. So I'm not ever claiming to be perfect on this. But I'll tell you this, delay send is quite controversial. And I was talking about this on a podcast recently, because every time I talk about how much I delay send on social media, someone crops up and it's like it's my fault for setting the wrong expectations of my team or something, and that's delay sends. And I'm like, whoa, for a start, there will be women on my team who've had like 20 years of work experience before they came and worked with Upsource. I'd be like, I may know them now, but I have no idea how hard boundaries was, that if they were expected to, and I, you know, can't just undo 20 years of habits. So the kind thing I can do is delay send till Monday morning if I'm choosing to work on a Saturday night. But no, there's always someone. It's a bit like that tribe of like, well, you chose to have babies. It's like, well, you're like choosing when they work, or it's like, for some reason, my fault that I think it's the kind thing to do is to delay send Slacks or emails, because the one time a client was like not a right fit, it was really going bad, he emailed me on a Saturday night and I was at a wedding and I checked my emails and it was completely my fault for checking my emails. Don't know why. I was clearly so we all have a story, so I'm like, well, at least if it's coming with good intentions, doing delay send, and then I kick myself if I don't do it, because people answer and it's like, it's not necessarily my fault they're answering, even if I'm always like, because I have it all the time with people on the team, they'll be like, oh, sorry, I missed this. I'm like, I literally sent it 2 hours ago. If it was urgent, I would call you. Like, you know, if things are urgent.
Like, you'd see it.
Someone, Rachel from Accountant, founder of Stripex, she's amazing, was like, no one emails the fire brigade. And she's right, she doesn't look at her inbox at all during the day. She does monk mode in the morning. She doesn't have kids. Monk mode in the morning, and she's a morning person, clearly. Unlike us. So she does that, gets it all out the way, and then doesn't look in the day, because she's right, no one emails the fire brigade. No. So if like someone really, so I do checks of like, okay, sometimes a client might just email me, or something might need my attention, or something might excite me enough to want my attention, but otherwise I just leave it. And I have to deal with, because I have had inbox help as well, because I do practice what I preach, but you know, I've also got to be strategic about where my help is, and at the minute it's all on content, operations, and help with the team, to be transparent on that. So just to be transparent as well, that I'm not Superwoman and I have help with the business.
Oh, no, 100%. I mean, I am the worst when it comes to emails. I am so blessed with my partner and China, because they go, oh, Charlie, have you seen this? And I'm like, no. Thank God you guys are there, because I would have completely missed that. And I think it is purely, I've had this debate of like, I swear I've got some undiagnosed ADHD somewhere of going, I'm that guy that goes, I'll reply to that in a minute, and then it's been 3 days.
I know, that's where inbox zero works, because we can all be guilty of that. Well, I think WhatsApp is the worst. I'll reply to that in a minute, and I literally messaged a friend just before this, because I was like, sorry to miss your message 3 days ago.
I mean, we've spoke about loads about about parenting. We've touched on it, but we've not actually gone into it. So tell us a bit more about your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically I had this idea, I think basically as soon as I started Upsource, and a podcast, as you know, Charlie, is a lot of work. I always had it there, and I thought I just need to do it. I just felt being a founder, it was so part of my identity, and I felt I was listening to a lot of Diary of a CEO at the time, and you can't, so much of that, I mean, he's a young single guy, and not saying he can't, like he does get, I think he did get some feedback at one point that it was far too male heavy, and you know, he's had some amazing women on there, but they're not the ones that can really talk about being in it and that struggle of motherhood and business life, because a lot of us, the ones who start businesses after motherhood, it's because we've had this newfound, it's either we have to, there's a mix of that with me, but just a newfound passion, but also we've got this really amazing thing of perspective, which is what I think I've got, which I wouldn't have had pre-parenthood, of like, at the end of the day, as long as my family are healthy, it doesn't really matter. And I think that perspective is really helpful as a founder, so you don't end up just being all ego-driven and self-sabotaging. But with the podcast, we have amazing founders on there. We've had people like the founders of Flowerbox, Koru Kids, Olio, which is a great app. And that's what I found with a lot of these women who are mothers and founders. They're really trying to make the world a better place. They really are. Yep. And you know, and they may be making money. They may have raised millions. They may all have bootstrapped themselves and doing super well. But whether it's trying to help other mothers, trying to bring more joy to other women. We had someone who sold sex toys online, and it was an amazing business. And, you know, all the things they're going up against. And it is that thing, whether it's time, family life, or the misogyny within the fundraising system, or just being taken seriously, or knowing what their business is going to be like. That's a journey I've been going on with Upsource, is that we grew hugely and then it kind of stagnated, because it was like, how much can we grow for this, and how much do I want it? And so that's my journey right now with the business, is like, right, how far are we scaling with this? What does this actually look like, especially in the industry I'm in, where there aren't amazing role models of this, or not the ones that I look up to of this. So yeah, that's kind of what we do, and I share a bit of my journey as well. We've done like an in-person event. I just think it's a conversation that needs to be had, is just to kind of discover how we're doing it in a world where it costs about at least £1,500 per month per child to go into childcare preschool, and then when you get to school, you've got school hours, you might not have wraparound care. We're all living with bills increasing and things. I think it's a really important conversation to have, and we're all trying to build great businesses to try and level out the founder community. I mean, 1% of VC funding goes to women right now. What proportion of that goes to mothers? That's our podcast, and we do try to keep it light as well.
Oh no, I love it. Like as I say, weirdly, like obviously you made the comment to say that it's often not something you hear a lot from men making comments on stuff like this. But I think it's interesting, because I've got a lot of friends that now are going through parenthood. I've got older family members that are going through it, and the system does, as we said earlier, the system doesn't work, and a lot of the time you're seeing parents and mothers go into self-employment so that they can find that balance between looking after their family and also having some income coming in. But then obviously there's the additional pressure that as soon as it's self-employment, also no one else is helping you. And as my dad would always say, the best cure for self-employment, best cure for the common cold is self-employment.
You will never have a cold when you're self-employed.
No.
And you saw that as well during COVID. That's a very interesting point, is that how they worked out furlough for self-employed. It didn't account for women that took maternity leave during their whatever period that was. I actually, it wasn't relevant for me, but that's what I hear, and that is just the tip of the iceberg on the things that aren't thought of. I mean, there was a lot of that during COVID, hence where they opened up barber shops, but not women's beauty shops. But
I never even realised. That's crazy. I never even realised that. Why does that makes no
Make it make sense.
No.
Is the answer. That's what we say a lot. It's like, I saw someone, a famous actress right now who's pregnant, was judged for putting on weight, and then Taylor Swift is being judged for not being a mother, and it's like, you can't win. So that's why all mothers just end up being a bit loud, because we're just like, well,
the thing
what have I got to lose?
What I don't understand, and this is what I always say, is like, I don't understand why people can't just let people be people. It's like, you go, I don't want to have kids. Cool. I do. Yeah. Move on. It's the same. I always use the really extreme example. Do you like mushrooms? Yes, I don't. Same conversation. It's so weird.
Unless someone says that about chocolate or something, that's like,
see, my sister's weird. She doesn't like chocolate. And I'm like, you are so strange.
Yeah, exactly. We're judging her now.
I wanted to ask, what are some of the, because obviously we've spoke a lot about the amazing people we have on the podcast. I was wondering, what are some of the really inspiring stories that you've had on your podcast?
We've had some really, really good ones. I'll start with, I'm probably just a bit biased towards them, but anyone who's gone through pregnancy, miscarriage, IVF, or trauma or anything like that through COVID, because it was horrible, and I think we're only all starting to come out of that it was an awful time. And even I had friends who had their babies 4 months after I had mine, and the experience was still hugely different with pregnancy and COVID and lockdowns. to the point where they go, oh, I can't remember what phase it was. And I'm like, I can. And I had an 18-month-old baby and was pregnant. And so some of those stories, and the women who come on, like, they still cry about them. And I've cried on the podcast about them. And it's because they haven't had a space or time to heal that period of their life, which I think will hopefully still be reviewed in the years to come. I look forward to when the research comes out for all of this. And I'm just like saying, I told you so. So them, and I've had a couple of women, a couple of standouts, Maria, in the slow clothing industry, as in repurposing, and a lady called Catherine Ann Reed, founder of a fantastic organisational app called Docket. They're both parents of special educational need and disabilities, and oh gosh, it's not just obviously the journeys they go on, and Catherine Ann's daughter is 21 and has still got needs, and the other one, her daughter Maria, her daughter's 8, but they it's how much of a fight they have to put up as mothers to get what their kids deserve and need to exist in society. And they just, I think Catherine Ann is at the stage where she's used to that fight and been doing it for so many years and knows how to support other women in that fight. But Maria is still, I've seen her on social media, is still very much in the thick of that fight, getting what her daughter needs and deserves. And I'm just every time I speak to mothers like that, I'm just like, wow, you guys are amazing. So I think those two stand out for me.
I mean, I completely relate to that. Obviously, being a wheelchair user myself and having that growing up, like, some of the support, it's just not there. And then obviously, as we've already touched on, the world isn't getting any better in terms of it's a lot of the time. I do, because I speak to a lot of businesses, I do understand, and a lot of organisations, of why that support's not there. It's essentially there's not enough time, not enough money, and not enough people. And that's across the board. Not enough schools, not enough housing. It's just not enough. There's just not enough.
No, that's it. And it has, and, you know, hopefully there will be change. You know, that's what we've all got to live in. But a while there's and it is largely the mothers fighting it, slow, as we've explained. They're the ones that say the fathers are incredible too, I'm sure. But, you know, I'm talking to the mothers on this podcast, and in those situations, in their circumstances, they were the ones fighting for it. And I'm just like, you know, to imagine we're both tired pigeons, as we described, and having to do that every day. But yeah, and I'm sure you completely relate to that, Charlie. I think your parents sound that they did wonders. Incredible job.
I mean, as I say, it's that whole thing of I didn't know at the time, and then sort of as I've grown up, I've gone, shit, yeah, they made that look easy.
Well, they did it. That's the job, isn't it? And that's what everyone strives for, is to be like Charlie's parents.
I mean, as I say, I remember saying that. I remember lots of times, particularly with Dad's business, struggling and things like that. But, like, a lot of it, as I say, from my perspective, being disabled as well, like, they kind of just took it in their stride and was like, okay, cool. Like, people are always amazed. They're like, oh, you're so chatty, you're so this, so that. And I think 90% of it comes from, I was treated no different by my parents. They were like, okay, cool, Charlie's in a wheelchair, move on. It's not a big, it wasn't a big discussion. But coming back to your pod and the ethos around the pod, one thing I did want to ask before I ask the last question is, what is a piece of advice that you'd give to mum entrepreneurs if they're looking to start a business, or they're in the thick of it at the moment? What advice would you give?
Oh, great question, because I feel like that's 2 questions. I think if you're in the thick of it, be kind to yourself. It's great to have ambition, keep that ambition, but don't feel like everyone else is achieving something and you're not. Because, like, I you know, you can see from my background in childhood with entrepreneur family and divorced parents that I'm just built of us, and I happen to find my passion within the VA industry, that I'm just kind of, how I've done it is not how everyone should do it. And it's the same for people on the podcast. How Rachel at Corey Kids does it, who's like, you know, works at 200% every day, I feel is not the same as others who are like, a founder of Mama Bamboo, like a fantastic, I hope I've said that right, now I've said it, Laura from Mama Bamboo. I hope it's Mama Bamboo. It's cheeky. No, I can't remember the name of the business. That's so bad. Anyway, she knew in the early years, in the thick of it, that wasn't the right time. She kept the passion, kept the idea, now has fantastic businesses and employs mothers and gives them flexible working. So, you know, you're all on our own path. Don't compare others. When you're ready, whatever it is, like I only know I started a business knowing what I know, and I think there's such benefits in that of like just being, I didn't have to go and spend a year researching a product and getting no money kind of thing. And if that's what you need to do, like go for it, like go listen to the podcast. Those women can talk about that way better than I can. But if you're like me and need to bring in income, work out what you need to bring in, what you'd like to bring in, what you dream to bring in, and then go from there kind of thing. I just always come back to the money, because I just think money is power and we need more of it as women and mothers.
No, I hear that, and I think that the other thing as well is with that, you know, everyone says like, oh, money doesn't, not that I agree with it, but I think it does need tweaking, the whole idea of money doesn't buy happiness. I'm like, it doesn't buy happiness, but it certainly relieves a lot of stress.
Yeah,
and obviously there comes a point of managing, when it gets to silly amounts, yes, that adds to stress because there's the managing it all, but there's a certain threshold.
Oh yeah, that too.
There's a certain threshold you get to and you go, okay, I'm good. I'm certainly not there yet.
No, me neither. But we will, and I think that's it. I think women can sometimes feel too apologetic about money, and especially when you've got to think about caregiving as well. But at the end of the day, it's what the amounts I'm talking about is not the amounts some greedy corporations are talking about.
Yeah. So. No, I hear that. It's interesting as well, because I think it's just about finding what, as you said, it's finding what works for you. I think one of the things I've realised recently is also don't overthink it, because that's one of the traps that I end up in, is people have an idea or they have a thing they want to do and they overthink. It's that thought process analysis of thought process paralysis of, oh, but this could go wrong, this could go wrong. Yes, it could all go wrong, but you're not going to know unless you pick a path and go down the path.
Yeah. No, that is so true, and you can. Some people really overcomplicate it, and I think probably because I had such little time being pregnant, main carer, feeling awful all day, every day in early COVID, I had to just do it with some things. And so I think that was a real benefit of, like, I couldn't spend all day agonising over the detail of things and worrying about it. I just had to do it. And I think there is a lot to be said of just do it. And if you're going to be working school hours, I think this is such a good point of don't try and beat yourself up like that. You should be achieving more when you're not working a 40-day week. You're achieving, set yourself easily achievable, still ambitious, because I think we should still do that, but goals that you can just celebrate at the end of the week because you achieved them in 5 hours a day. And I think I should do that tomorrow. I think
it's one of my rules. One of my rules I always tell myself is always just try and move the weight a little bit every day. If you move the weight a little bit every day, then it's going to move forward. But if you don't, and you get in the whole thing of, I've done like X amount of hours this week, and then you do none the next. Consistency is key.
Consistency really is, and you can see that with everything from social media and stuff, and I think that's what I see a lot when people go in all guns blazing and then it's kind of tumbleweed. You start the business, you launch the business, and then it is tumbleweed. It is for most people. Nothing happens, the world keeps on spinning, and it's that, like, you've just got to keep going through it, because I have seen it with people like, I'm going to start a social media page, and then they realise they're not hitting like 1,000 followers overnight, and I'm like, I'm still like not like on the cusp of 2,000, and I've been doing this for 4 years. Not that's a bit of a vanity metric, but I think that's quite an easy one to like demonstrate its consistency.
It's also, you can get, with social media, you can get very, 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 very wrapped up in it. And the worst thing is you end up very obsessive over the numbers. The same thing happens with anything like a podcast. I'm sure you do the same. Sit there going,
no, don't check my number. Not at all, yes. And the same happens with then business numbers, client numbers, team numbers. And it's kind of like, as long as you're going to you're not going to go just this. And maybe you will. That's great. But most of us don't. And it is going to be dips. And and that's what you have to learn with self-employment, I think, is the real, like, when the lows can feel like lows sometimes, but the highs feel so much better than anything when you're employed.
I suppose it's also that whole, I mean, I'm not fully self-employed at this point, but it's also that whole thing of it's all within your, to an extent, it's within your control. You're not reliant on another individual. But that isn't also saying that every Tom, Dick and Harry's got to be self-employed. No, it's not for everyone. I'm still figuring out whether it's definitely for me. It's just about finding, as we've said several times on this podcast, it's always about just finding what works for you. If it works for you, great, keep doing that.
And like, my husband's employed people who were self-employed and then go back to employment. I think we're living in a world where, you know, that can happen, and we're all open to it. And it's not because it didn't work out, it worked out fine, and now they want to go back and just be the doer in the business and then retire kind of thing now that they've got to that certain point. And I think it's a really good point to point out, is that you can give it a go and then go back. It's not failure, it's just part of your career journey kind of thing, and people respect it.
I think that's really interesting, because that's something I've battled with at the moment recently, is that whole thing of, like, if you make the leap into self-employment, I think my natural thought process, and this is a terrible thought process, don't advise this for anyone, but I'd almost have that, like, tail between your legs analogy of, like, oh, it didn't work.
No, and that's not it. No, I know. And I think that was where I have huge respect for people that jump into self-employment, because obviously I did not do that. I had to be pushed twice. And that's why it was like, well, I've got nothing to lose. If this doesn't work, I'm just like, I tried it. I'll go back to being employed at some point. And I have huge respect for people that do just be like, right, this is it, I'm going to take this moment and do it, because I'm like, wow, well done you.
Definitely. I mean, it's so, obviously something I've spoken about before. It's like I've debated, and then the anxiety kicks in, and I'm like, yep, nope.
Do it. You'll do it at some point, I'm sure of it. And and I think that's why business owners, founders, I've never found it lonely being self-employed, because I think we all just get it. The conversations I have with friends, husbands, here, like, we just have a different kind of side chat when we're talking, because we just get it. We don't have to be all rosy all the time, and it's a lovely community. I think so, when you find the right people.
It's all finding the right people is so important in anything. But lastly, I'm going to ask you the question I ask every guest, and it's worried you slightly when I mentioned it at the beginning.
I'm still worried.
Which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
I'm still not even sure I really understand the question.
Okay, let's reframe this. What I often do if someone has that experience is think of a unpopular opinion or something you think needs to be spoken about more.
What needs to be spoken about more, okay, I'm going to go with this one, is that, because it's on theme with me and my personal journey, and I think many women identify this, is that when we're in school, we're taught about our career and to go for it. I think especially as a woman, I'm not a man, so I can't speak from this perspective, but so pushed into go have your career, you can do it, the statistics, going into finance now, it is a 50-50 gender split apparently, please don't quote me on that, I don't know, but then we're told the missing piece about when we have a family. And I think this should be included in just growing up in society and being a human being and being a choice, because I know we're all so concerned we don't want teenagers running off and getting pregnant, and being educated about that. Some make fantastic parents, but you don't want to do it if it's not the right time for you. And I think it is just that we need to be taught more about what it's like to become a human being and the different phases we go through, and then to stop making it so scary or such a what are you complaining. It's the either or. You either get people terrified to become parents, or you get people being like, oh, I don't want to be one of those guys, like look at them.
I mean, to be fair, for me it's that whole terrified's a strong word, but there is that whole shit, I'm responsible for this human being. I mean, I look at it and go, yeah, but you've had dogs and stuff in the past. I'm like, no, that's a very different kettle of fish. Very different kettle of fish. And I think coming on to your point of the discussion about schools, I think the other thing you touched on with the careers thing is half of our curriculum isn't built around actual, not even careers, because I wouldn't want it built around careers, but in terms of skills that you use in day to day. I know everyone goes on about like, oh, you do use algebra. Once or twice, maybe. Or if you work in construction, yes, 100%. But those are specialist skills that you can drill down into if you want to go into that area. Like, one of my big debates is, why aren't kids spoken about mortgages? Or finances, or anything like that.
Pensions, investing, like this is a huge thing, because then it's kind of kept amongst the people in the know and they're smarter. And I actually kind of feel a little bit in the medical industry, and something that's kind of wrong with birth is sometimes it's often been like, you don't need to know about this, and it's like, yes, I do, it's my body. And it's the same in finance. You don't need to know about this. It's like, yes, you do, it's my cash, and I can build wealth, and I can prevent debt better and build wealth. And you're so right, those are key skills as part of this. It's like being a good human being, but also being one that knows how to not just survive in this world but thrive in this world, and knowing how to do a tax return if you do become self-employed, and knowing about basic bookkeeping. You could totally teach basic bookkeeping in schools, or just like working your way around a spreadsheet so you know how to keep a budget ready for university or your first job or your first pay packet, how to divvy it up correctly. Wouldn't that be an excellent skill? And I think the problem is the system, not the teachers. It's like we're just in the system now. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was at university and went to see a careers advice person, they were like, you're studying music, and they were like, okay, you could apply for an internship at the Royal College, like the Royal Opera House. And I'm like, yeah, because they're not competitive and unpaid.
I mean, it's interesting because we, like you say about that, and then I remember when I left school, I did really well in performing arts, and I've said several times on the pod, the main reason I never explored that career was because, one, I didn't want to be casted to type in terms of always playing the sad guy in the wheelchair, and then also the other thing I had was it was going to be a very difficult industry for me to make a living out of, because there's only so many guys in wheelchairs that you can play, because those roles don't exist a lot. And I was having a lot of the same questions. They were like, oh, but you could walk into the, because I did well, and they were like, oh, you could walk into the Brit school, you could do this, could do that. And I'm like, yeah, but what's the end goal? Unless I hit it big and turn like, and unless you loved it, I think that's the point as well. I think anything like performing arts, you really have to love it and then be lucky, get a chance. And like I said, you've got the issues with typecasting, and it's I completely see why, as a fellow turn their back on performing, I can see why you completely did that kind of thing. But I think sometimes people want to feel they're encouraging, don't they? And it's you know, sometimes in well-meaning but not the best 100%. And I think as well it's interesting from my side of things when we talk about particularly the finance that we've just spoken about. A lot of the time I find it really strange because I know a lot of my knowledge comes from my mum and dad. So then when I have those conversations with my friends, they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, and then I have to basically turn it into like this isn't financial advice, but this is how the system works.
Yeah, definitely not financial advice, you should say. Or even this morning, like I was just talking about, me and my husband were just having a chat about fundraising and not fundraising, investment and the tax schemes and things like that, and like just chatting about it, because I was like, I still don't particularly get this, and my husband was like, just like check, you do, but just check the details with ChatGPT, because like you know it, you don't need to like do any more learning. And I was like, oh, okay, now this all makes sense. And it was so simple. This was it, but I felt like it'd been made to feel like really complicated, and I was like, oh, I understand. It was like SEIS and EIS, which if you don't know, just Google them and it's simple. But I was like, why? And he was like, because it's not relevant for me in my business stage, but it might be relevant for clients. And you never know when things can be relevant one day, which is why I've been turning a lot of investment things. Because I'm like, if my business does well, maybe I'll be an angel investor. But it's knowing those things are possible without thing. And, you know, even knowing what they are. Might be people listening. It's like, angel? 100%. What's an angel?
No, 100%. It's just those little pieces of information. I mean, in a lot of that can be covered in business studies, which I did, but then there's just the more day-to-day stuff that still amazes me that it's not in the curriculum, like you say, with the understanding how pregnancy works, because it's interesting, as I say, with family members going through it at the moment, you see that whole thing of it's like a whole new world. I mean, I live in a not strange, but again, a lucky scenario where my close cousin's a midwife, so she does know inside out, back to front, all sorts. So when female family members are going through that journey, poor Kelsey's there to guide them and be like, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. But no one else has got that.
Everyone needs that friend who does that. One of my best friends is a midwife, and she was definitely that. And then the shock still comes when the baby comes, because after 10 days they don't really know a lot after that, which she always said. But I think it is that, because I think there is always this then sudden rush at 30 to feel like you need to know everything you should know about finances, be on the housing ladder, be on the right career path, and potentially thinking about becoming a parent. And I think that's just such a terrifying time of life for anyone, to feeling like you should be doing everything, but then also know all this stuff in the first place.
Yeah, and the worst thing is, as someone, I'm 25, and I feel like that's getting younger and younger. Like, I'm looking at people younger than me, and I'm going, shit, you guys have moved out, had kids, done this, done that, and I'm like, did I miss something?
Don't worry, definitely under 25, I was doing none of that stuff. So.
it's when I'm like,
I'd moved out, yeah. I'll give myself that.
It's when you go and they go, oh yeah, I've got the house, I've got the kids, and I've got the 2 dogs as well, and I'm like, whoa, like,
they're going to be living the dream in their 50s, like child-free and pet-free.
To be fair, again, my parents are quite lucky, because me, obviously, I'm 25 and my sister's 32. I had to think about that then. That's terrible. They've now they have a better social life than I do. It's hilarious, because I sit there and go, they're like, oh, I'm here, I'm there, I'm here, I'm there, and I'm like, I'm at home with the dog.
Yeah, no, my dad's retired and lives in Cornwall, so I often get just like beach scenes when the weather's great, and I'm like, lovely, delightful, what a life you lead.
All these jealous people. Jealousy inducing. One day, you never know, it all comes around in the end, I suppose. Everyone says you'll get, as my dad says to me, you'll get there one day.
We will. That's a privilege as well. So we will definitely get to that privileged time once we've hustled our ass off during this economic climate.
Definitely. But on that note, I'm just going to say thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, it's been amazing. I've learnt so much, and also I think everyone else is going to learn a lot from this, because I think particularly as a man, you don't often reflect on stuff like this, and sometimes I suppose maybe for women as well, you don't necessarily think about it if you're not in that stage of life, but yeah, you learn so much by just having the conversation, and as we say, it's about opening that communication channel.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. I really appreciate coming on your podcast. You've been an excellent host, so thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, I will link everything below. So if you want to follow Caroline and ask any questions, drop her a message. I will put everything below for you. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast. These